So Annalisa has asked me to talk about innovative models of the public-private partnership for social progress. And I want to tell you about 5 of my favorite public-private partnerships. The first one that I'm going to describe to you is Better Than Cash Alliance, which was launched last year at the Ford Foundation during the General Assembly Week. The second one is a wonderful project that's 13 years old in India called Dasra. And the third one is called Turquoise Mountain. And there are 2 more that I'm going to save as a surprise. So how does the public-private partnership work? And I thought it might be helpful just to go through that very briefly because we talk about it a lot, but it's sort of how does it actually transpire and why? So the concept is that governments cannot solve all the problems by themselves. Corporations can't throw enough money at the problems to solve them all. And NGOs acting alone cannot do it by themselves. So the way that partnerships have worked is the public sector role is to set the norms and the standards and provide some of the funding. The private sector supplies funding, innovation, excellent management, leadership, and logistic skills, and a business rigor to tackling the problems. NGOs are the ones who deliver on the ground and provide insight into what actually works. So we've come a long way from the informal ad hoc way in which partnerships started. And just to talk about a couple of them, during the Bosnian War, when the water supply in Sarajevo was cut off, a man by the name of George Soros gave several million to the UN to reinstall the water and to give the people of Sarajevo their water. Ted Turner, in 1997, announced that he was going to give $1 billion to the United Nations. At that time, the entire annual budget of the United Nations was $1 billion. And Ted Turner had just sold CNN, and his take from that was $3 billion. So he decided he was going to give one of those billion to the UN. And it truly changed the entire structure of how the UN was able to address and tackle problems. They created the UN Foundation. On the back of that $1 billion, they went out and raised $600 million more over a 10-year period. The man who ran that effort, the partnership effort, is Amir Dosal, who, when he retired from the UN, started the Global Partnership Forum. And I'm very pleased to be associated with that and to continue to help him impact and change the way people think about how to work together in the public and private sector. So to talk about this wonderful new initiative, Better Than Cash Alliance, I wanted to talk about how it actually started. And that is with the whole concept of M-Pesa, which has become pretty famous. And I'm just going to give you a brief description. M-Pesa started in Kenya. M is for mobile. Pesa is Swahili for money. It's a mobile phone-based money transfer and microfinancing service that was started with Safaricom and Vodacom, the largest mobile network operators in Kenya and Tanzania. Currently the most developed mobile payment system in the world, M-Pesa allows users with a national ID card or passport to deposit, withdraw, and transfer money easily with a mobile device. In Kenya, M-Pesa was launched in March of 2007 by the Kenyan Mobile Network, of which Vodafone is a 40% minority shareholder. And it was an engineer at Vodafone that developed the software. M-Pesa quickly captured a significant market share for cash transfers and grew astoundingly quickly, capturing 17 million subscribers by December 2011 in Kenya alone. The growth of the service forced formal banking institutions to take note of the new venture. In December 2008, a group of banks lobbied the Kenyan finance minister to audit M-Pesa, and the audit found that the service was indeed very robust. So what happened to the growth of this incredible new service? It goes to Afghanistan, and here is a remarkable story. In 2008, Vodafone partnered with Roshan, Afghanistan's primary mobile operator. And just a sidebar comment on that, Roshan was started with funding from the Aga Khan Foundation. And the idea was to provide M-Pesa, which is it's spelled P-A-I-S-A in Afghanistan, that's the local brand. And when the service was launched, it was initially used to pay policemen's salaries. And the policemen's salaries were set to be competitive with what the Taliban was earning. This is fascinating. Soon after the product was launched, many police officers believed they had received a raise or that there was a mistake, as their salaries rose significantly. The National Police discovered that there was so much corruption with payments that had been made using the previous model that policemen didn't know their true salary. In addition, the Afghan National Police Force found that under the previous cash model, 10% of their workforce were ghost police officers who did not exist. Their salaries had been pocketed by others. The service has been so successful that it has been expanded to include limited merchant payments, peer-to-peer transfers, loan disbursements, and payments. So out of this model of M-Pesa, the Ford Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Citibank, Omidyar Network, USAID, the UN Capital Development Fund, and Visa got together and created what they call the Better Than Cash Alliance. And it was launched, as I mentioned, last year at the end of September. And the secretariat is the UN Capital Development Fund. And the other members have created a board, and they look at it continually to make sure everything is on the up and up. Because as everyone knows, things can get stuck. But the Better Than Cash Alliance provides expertise in the transition to digital payments to achieve the goals of empowering people and growing emerging economies. And this technology has empowered women in a way that perhaps they could have never envisaged, because many of the women who have cottage industries, who sell fruit in the market, who receive cash and have no access to bank accounts, were victimized. The male members of their family said that they had to turn the money over to them, or they were robbed. But in this way, they're able to hold on to their own money. So it has been hugely impactful in a positive way for women. It provides governments with more efficient, transparent, and secure means of dispersing salaries, pension, benefits, and payments. For the NGO development community, it creates lasting benefits for people, communities, and economies. For the private sector, it reduces many of the costs related to hard currency payments. So each one of the stakeholders has a benefit from this, and it's probably the way of the future in the developing world for people who do not have access to bank accounts. So far, the members include the governments of Colombia, Afghanistan, Kenya, Peru, and the Philippines. The development community members include CARE, Concern Worldwide, Mercy Corp, the UN Development Program, USAID, World Food Program, and the Grameen Foundation. And now we come to DASRA. DASRA is India's leading strategic philanthropy foundation, working with philanthropists and social entrepreneurs to create large-scale social change. DASRA's theory of change is that if philanthropists are equipped with the knowledge and social entrepreneurs are equipped with the knowledge, the funding opportunities, and people to make their work more strategic, then the social sector in India will be transformed dramatically. Nonprofits and social businesses will be able to create far more impact and benefit the maximum number of people much faster. DASRA has several initiatives to help both philanthropists and social entrepreneurs at various levels in their journey toward bringing about social change. DASRA is a convener. They go out and identify the social ill. They commission a study and a deep dive into the problems and how to solve the problems. Then they convene a giving circle of philanthropists, and they identify the social enterprise and the social entrepreneurs. They raise the money, they put the two together, and they mentor and train with business rigor the social enterprise and the social entrepreneurs. And they follow them for a period of time. So DASRA is now 13 years old. They have provided $14 million to nonprofits and social businesses in India from their startup 13 years ago, and strengthened the growth plans of 200 successful nonprofits and social businesses. They've commissioned research reports, have provided the knowledge and information for effective philanthropic funding focused on education, health, women's empowerment, disaster relief, livelihoods, water sanitation and hygiene, and sports for development. And 8 reports on social enterprise and philanthropy research in India. And each year they convene a philanthropy forum, which brings together social enterprise and philanthropists, and also provides a graduation ceremony for the young trainees that they've trained with a mini MBA. The third one I'd like to tell you about is Turquoise Mountain. And this was started by a young man who had started his career serving in the Black Watch. He left the British Army, he joined the Foreign Office, he served in Iraq. He wrote a book about that experience called Princes of the Marshes. And then he walked across Iran all the way to Afghanistan, and he wrote a book called The Places in Between. His name is Rory Stewart. For a time, he taught at the Kennedy School, and he was recruited to come back to the UK to run as an MP. During the time that he was in Afghanistan, he saw the remarkable vestiges of what was the historic center of Kabul, which was buried in 2 meters of garbage because the rubbish hadn't been picked up since about 1947. He decided that these people of Afghanistan needed to have their pride restored. He then looked at the incredible handicrafts that have been in the history of Afghanistan since about the 11th century. And he found the master woodworker selling vegetables and fruits in the market, and he'd been there for 15 years, and he'd had to give up his workshop because there was no one to buy his craft. So Rory came back, and he got the support of the Prince of Wales. And Turquoise Mountain was born and has the imprimatur of the Prince of Wales Charities. And with that, he was able to raise literally millions and millions from the United States, from the Gulf, and from Europe, and especially the UK, to support this charity. They make jewelry, and they have a brand new social enterprise, and they're selling jewelry in the West. They're seeking social investment in this, and they have their first museum exhibition sponsored by the Islamic Museum in Doha, and it's going to come to Leighton House in November. And it is a charity that has now morphed into a social enterprise. And it is a stunning story because when you consider what's going to happen in 2014, these people will be able to sustain themselves past the time when the ISAF forces leave. So these models are particularly important to talk about, to celebrate the good news stories in parts of the world that have indeed very dark problems. Now, there are two other great stories that I'd like to share with you, and I'd like to recognize Mira Shaw of the Shell Foundation, because she's doing some really exciting work, and I felt important that it come from Mira to talk about. And Mira, if you could just say a few words about the project with the Unilever New Business Development and the Shell Foundation in Africa, and then what you're doing in Bihar with electricity, that'd be fabulous. Yep.
Well, thank you, April. I feel really privileged and honoured, and April and I met actually 2 years ago at Womensphere in Oxford. And maybe just to put it in context, what Shell Foundation does. Shell Foundation's a registered charity, and we invest via grant funding into social enterprises that are very high risk, that are very early stage, and probably where no investor would actually touch. And we invest in them and take them to a stage where they're commercially viable and where they can actually attract Series A or Series B funding. And I'm really passionate about what I do, and I actually just came back from Uganda yesterday, and I mainly work in taking products and services that our social enterprises are working on and ensuring they get to the last mile customer at the bottom of the pyramid. And actually, April, if you don't mind, April was just talking about M-Pesa, and I was really excited when she was saying this, because I was just working with the team who founded M-Pesa just the last few days in Uganda. And just something about public-private enterprises. When the idea of M-Pesa was born by a gentleman called Nick Hughes, he was working in Vodafone. He was the head of mobile money payments there. And Vodafone actually weren't interested. They were like, oh yeah, that's not going to work, take it somewhere else. And it was actually DFID, the Department for International Development, who came in and said, this is a good idea, we're going to back it. And M-Pesa is actually probably the success story of the last decade in mobile money or in any mobile network operators. And I think that just goes to show that sometimes enterprises aren't willing to take that risk, and it takes a third party, maybe a government, maybe a foundation, to get involved. And Shell Foundation is now working with the founder of M-Pesa on their new venture called M-Copa. And again, another example of public-private partnership, where there's so much money in this world, actually. Money's not the issue, it's skills and the deployment of those skills to get that money to the right place. And for the first time, actually, it's not Shell Foundation's money that is helping their new venture, M-Copa. It's DFID's money, and DFID has actually come to Shell Foundation and asked us to deploy it and manage it. And what M-Copa are doing is they're enabling low-income customers to purchase solar lanterns via pay-as-you-go technology through their mobile phones. So it's a bit like top-up credit. And they can switch on or off the system only if they have credit, and M-Copa can actually track this data. So I just wanted to share that with you because we talked about M-Pesa. But another example of public-private partnerships is in the clean cook stove space. Indoor air pollution kills about 4 million people a year, and it's a big issue. So this is women cooking with traditional stoves in developing countries. And this is a large ecosystem to make this work. So Shell Foundation have been working in this space for about 10 years. But we can't do this alone. And if you look at supply chain and distribution, this is the most critical thing to actually make this work. And so I've been working with Unilever in Kenya. And I think I'll make that point because I think someone mentioned, where do you see CSR going in the next few years? We're actually not working with CSR at Unilever. We're not working with the Unilever Foundation. We're actually working with their new business development unit and Unilever Kenya, their operating unit, and looking at their supply chain and distribution and seeing how we can distribute stoves commercially to the end customer and look at innovative financing models to enable the end customer to purchase the stove. And I think to make this actually work, so many people are involved. So to get this to scale, it can't just be Unilever or Shell Foundation, but Shell Foundation inaugurated the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves. So for other people to replicate this, copy it, scale it. Likewise, Berkeley Air, that came out of Berkeley University, they are doing the monitoring of the carbon, the technical processes, so that other people can actually use this, get carbon credits for this. Likewise, we're working with MFIs, with the UN. The UN Refugee Center came to us and said, we can kick your ass in distribution, we'll tell you how to do it, but we don't know about energy. So I think loads of people are trying to get together, and I think it's amazing that it's so collaborative and people want to get together, and it has to be, from financing, supply chain, distribution, awareness. NGOs are great at doing the awareness on the ground. So that would be about stoves. And April, you wanted me to talk about Bihar. So power is a big issue. And majority of power, the centralized power grid, doesn't get to the poorest of the poor. And in Bihar, this is particularly so. It's one of the poorest states in India. It's almost lawless. It was lawless. Now the government's changed. And we've invested into an enterprise called Hus Power Systems. And it's one of the most innovative I've seen, and one of the only off-grid power solutions at its scale. They take rice husk, they gasify it, and then they produce electricity. And a plant's about this size. And it requires 4 people. It's low in capex, and the guys can actually run it. And they're actually looking at a franchisee model. So we started with them when we had 1 plant, and they now have 80 plants. And 1 plant can power a whole village of 4,000 people. And the great thing is that the customers are paying for this, so they value the electricity. This is not free, and it's the world's lowest cost metering system. And again, in terms of public-private partnership, this is a social enterprise. We're a foundation. IDEO, the design company, designed the metering system. So a lot of people are involved, a lot of investors involved, and now they've got Series A funding, which is fantastic. So they came with 1 man, 1 business idea, a bit of R&D, to 80 plants, with the Hus Power University, where they take people from the village, educate them, train them to be mechanics, and now thinking of opening a plant in Uganda with the support of the Ugandan University. So again, a lot of people involved, and I don't think anyone can solve these issues of access to energy or poverty alleviation alone. So yeah, I'll leave you with that.
Can you talk about what it does for women in Bihar?
Yes, I can give you just one short example. I had no idea what it meant not to have power or energy, and the CEO of Hus Power Systems says, Merit, you have no idea. I'm going to take you out into a village in pitch dark. And I was so scared. I was like, where's my torch? And we went out. There's no one there. It's the poorest state in India. And he goes, I'll tell you what happens. And this is linked to sanitation as well. Women generally don't have a toilet in these areas, and so they can't go to the toilet in the day. And they can't go into the fields because men will look at them. So then at night, they go to the toilet, and it's in the fields. And there's no light, there's absolutely no form of power. And in the fields are men lurking, ready to rape them. And so it just goes to show that without access to energy or without good sanitation, there are repercussions that I personally had never even thought about. So that's just one of the repercussions. There's many more, and I could talk for hours.